I thought this Paris cafe, this very typical Parisian corner apartment and shop on the ground floor with its wonderful and quite characteristic of Paris red awning, was a great and somewhat fun subject for a daily drawing exercise. It's going to challenge us with a few things, certainly with perspective angles, also with foreshortening down that left and right hand side, with proportions, getting these windows into their respective rectangles so that they sit at the right size in the right place. And then doing it all relatively quickly, but still somehow managing to capture a sense of realism in our lines. So you can see where I start. I start on that top left front corner, and I'm seeking to really establish the proportions of this cut off corner of the building. It feels like we're looking much more front on than we are anywhere else. So this is going to be the easiest place for us to establish some accuracy and create a section that we can use now to measure off the other parts of our drawing. I'm using a 0.3 millimeter Copic multiliner, a refillable one, so it has the silver barrel. And I hummed and ahed whether it was just a little bit too large. It's a fairly pretty much new pen, or at least the nib and the ink inside is newly refilled, so it's got a fair amount of juice in it to get some blackness. I wondered whether it'd be a little bit too black, but I thought I'd give it a go. So with this is where we have to hit that balance between drawing enough detail for it to actually represent what we're looking at in life, in our photo, and to actually trigger association with the true subject in our mind and our imagination when we see the drawing. And yet we can't get too precise or else we won't have time. This actually took me 15 minutes to draw in real time. And I felt like it was longer than that, so I was a bit surprised. The first 10 minutes you'll watch me draw in real time, and I get most of it in terms of the broad picture of it done in that time. And then we'll switch to double time. But if you want to watch the entire video at actual drawing speed, then when I mention that it switches to double time, just use the cog icon to reduce the speed to half video speed, and that will bring it back into being real time. And so now I have this other corner defining that, perhaps not as equal on left and right of the window as I would have liked. A little bit more on the left than the right, but I think it's adequate for when all the rest of the drawing is put in. So as you can see, I'm not agonizing over precision with these, but I do want these inset lines simulating mortar between stones, but I'm sure in actual fact more like a plasterwork over the top. I do want them to approximately follow the perspective angles without having to measure them exactly. But particularly these large black lines that we have that separate the stories, the floors of the apartment. I want to try and get those angles correct. And it's difficult in the time frame that I'm thinking of drawing this in to get all the detail done. And I've also got to work out what detail will I include. And with detail, I include the hatching that I will or won't use. I want to do some hatching for some elements, but I don't want to do nearly as much hatching as I would do on this scene if I were drawing it with a relatively unlimited time frame. Someone asked me in a live session last night why in a particular video I was I was always stressing the time it took to draw it. And this was also a fast pen drawing. And it's because the sort of marks we make do often depend very much, and the sort of therefore style that appears in the drawing very much depends on the speed with which we're expecting to be making decisions and applying marks and pushing on. And so it is important when we watch a video of someone drawing that we have a sense of how long it took them, and we have a sense of, was this in their mind a quick gestural drawing, or was it a longer drawing where they took it at a more leisurely pace? Because that tells us something about the choices they're making, the stylistic concerns that they have, that affect technique, that affect the way we make marks and lines, the way we draw them, the speed with which we draw them, the observation that we use before we draw them. So you can see now with this side, it's severely foreshortened. The most important thing really is to get the main angles correct of the walls around these windows, because the windows are mostly shadowed clutter as far as I can see. And so I'm wanting to draw that shadowed clutter and not starting too much to draw blinds and little rails and window boxes and parts of window framing that we can see. What I could have done is I could have printed this photo out at a larger size. That would have let me see more detail, and if I was going to draw it actual size, larger, then I would have probably done that and taken more time for the drawing. But it is a very good skill to develop, to be able to shrink down the detail that we see in front of us to a smaller version on our paper. And we certainly get practice at this if we enjoy doing location sketching, where obviously there's a lot of shrinking down of the building that we're drawing to fit it onto our paper. But to work out just how much detail we have to lose because it simply can't be drawn with the pen we've got in the space we've got, and then how we're going to represent what's left, whether we're going to try and draw some of it or much of it still in a recognizable form, or whether we're totally going for the visual effect of clutter somewhat, and therefore we need marks, just enough marks to suggest a bit of architecture, but a lot of marks to suggest the clutter, and to combine them in a way that at a glance our brain says, oh yes, I know what that is. And certainly on this side, if you look carefully at what I'm drawing, a lot of it doesn't really make sense if you focus just on that part, and even if you try and relate it particularly to the reference. But I think at the end, in the context of the whole drawing, and we have to have in mind the context of the whole drawing at the end, I think when we look at these areas, they sit nicely in place. They don't draw attention for being somehow messy or not looking like they go there, because there's enough catch of realism in the marks, in the effect, that our brain is seeing them as more than they really are. So getting some larger photos that have quite a lot of detail and shrinking them to a smaller size, and then drawing them the actual size of the photo, so that we have to shrink down the detail and make these sorts of conceptual choices, is wonderful practice when we draw. And it will help us develop a faster location sketching style. And that's going to be great if this is something we want to do, and we don't want to keep bringing home sketchbooks with a quarter finished drawings, because after an hour the people we were with wouldn't wait any longer and we couldn't continue it. So learning to catch things by catching the visual effect on a smaller scale, even of complex scenes, is a great skill to develop. It was really, really hot when we were in Paris. It was temperatures over 30 degrees every day, and there's so much stonework that when the sun's overhead, in high summer, it's just bouncing off all the streets and the buildings, and it really becomes at times quite oppressive. It certainly felt hotter than 30 degrees feels in Australia. I'm not sure why, there's probably a reason for that. So this is our 10 minutes up now, and we switch into double time. So you're now watching me draw this at twice the speed that I actually was drawing it. And having come down now to ground level, there's always a greater complexity at ground level with architecture, or almost always. And so there's a lot more choices to make about what will I draw and what won't I draw. And there's a fair bit of detail in the very front of the building that it really is hard to work out what it was. And I would have done some more representational marks to catch the effect of those things if I had more time. But given that I was into double speed, I thought I would also simplify it slightly, because really the interest, I think, is in the architecture, and it's in the presentation of one of these quintessential Parisian scenes that the interest is. Not so much the story of this cafe, if it is a cafe. It probably is. They mostly are, these buildings. And that's why they have the awning, because there's often tables and chairs outside. So the fact that there aren't, although I think there is if you look at the lower right section of the building, you can see some timber framing, which I think encloses a part of the footpath. So I think you'll find that's where their sidewalk eating section is. And look, I realise I'm so far behind at this stage, so I do these sections really, really probably a bit too loosely for the rest of the style that I've used. But I think a great daily drawing exercise. So please hit the like button if you've enjoyed watching this, and maybe give a go drawing it. And of course, I'm going to post this photo, this reference photo, on my channel community page, so you can go there and get a copy of it, or simply draw it on the screen there. I suggest you don't watch my drawing while you're actually drawing, but just use the reference photo to do it, because it's learning to look at the photo and then come up originally with the marks and the proportions on the paper that you need. That is the real skill you need to develop, and you don't get to do that if you start to copy my line work. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, hope you found this interesting. Hope you have a go at spending a little time in a sunny Paris street. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, and for whatever reason you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.